Hello, boys and girls. I still try to study logic, and I admit I have a lot of trouble with some operations in logic. And today I actually want to talk with you about one of these problems that I have, and maybe you can help me with that. So I'm still reading the book of Gensler, Introduction to Logic, and we do now refutations. So we have here a syllogism that is obviously not valid because we say the premise all logicians are funny, maybe true. Someone is a logician, and then we conclude if everyone is funny. And I think the idea is that when you have an argument, the premises must be true, and if the premises are true, the conclusion cannot be wrong. So, and I think that Gensler doesn't explain the whole process of thought here that makes this refutation reasonable. So first we translate that for all x it is true that if somebody is logician then he's funny, Lx follows Fx. Then second, there exists at least one x that is a logician. And then we have the last line, the third one, therefore everyone is funny, which is obviously not following. It may be true that everyone is funny, right? But the conclusion could also be false, so that not everyone is funny, even if the premises are true. I think that's important here, and therefore we make the assumption on line 3, the opposite assumption, namely that the conclusion is false. And the conclusion does not lead to a contradiction. So we are allowed to actually assume that. And there are some consequences that we can derive from that, and we also should do that in order to lead our refutation. So in line 4, we say, okay, what do we do here? I think we derive that from 3. So we have a reverse squiggle that we say, okay, if everyone is funny, then there must be at least one individual there must be at least one x. Oh, we have that from 3. I thought we have that from here because that makes no sense, right? So we reverse squiggle here. So we say not everyone is funny. Then there must be at least one individual that is not funny. Then we have a drop of an existential. So we say there is someone who's funny and we call him A. So there must be at least one individual, right? Then we also drop the existential from line 4. So we say there must be then somebody who's not funny. We call them B. According to 1, we assume again that if A is a logician, then A must be funny. That's also what leads us to line 9, by the way, FA. So A is funny. Same can be done for 8 when we apply 1. So if B is a logician, then he should be funny, but B is not funny, therefore he cannot be a logician. So we get that from 6 and 8. So there is no contradiction in this, but we have derived some lines. So here Gensler actually says, since we get no contradiction, we gather the simple pieces to give a refutation. Our refutation is a little possible world with two people, A and B. So first of all, A is a logician, and A is funny, and then B isn't a logician, and B isn't funny. Now, and the interesting thing is, we don't really say that in the premises, but we have one possible world where the premises are true, like if somebody's a logician, he's funny, then there is somebody who's a logician, and he's funny, but then we also can imagine that someone is not funny, so the conclusion is false. And what we said is, if the premises are true, the conclusion cannot be false. And therefore, that is a refutation. So that's how I understand it. They put it like here a little bit more in different words. In our word, universal premise, if for all x it is true that if logician then funny is true since all cases are true. So we have here LA follows FA. That means both is true and therefore we get truth. Here we get falseness for both, therefore it's also true. This is basic inference rule, right? So existential premise, there exists at least one Lx is true. Since at least one case is true, we have La as a logician. But a universal conclusion, x fx is false. Since at least one case is false, we have not f, b isn't funny. So our possible world makes the premises all true and the conclusion false. Now, I don't think they explain that completely, right? I think the idea is that the conclusion can be false under certain conditions. So that's another syllogism that we apply there that we haven't written out. And so, however, the premises are true, so the conclusion cannot be false under no circumstances. And that's why the argument is invalid. So now we come to another argument. This argument is harder for me to understand, to be honest. Okay, so let's look at the argument. There exists no x, so that fx and gx. So in this world, everyone is funny and great, okay? And there exists an x that is funny, so that x must also be great, if I understand that. There exists, oh wait, I read that wrong. First premise, there exists no x, so that anyone is funny and great. And then we have a funny person, all good so far. And then we have someone who's not great. There exists no x, so that he's great. But there is a possible world where somebody who exists who is great. I guess that's how we have to assume it, right? So the conclusion could be wrong while the premises are true. I think that's how we have to evaluate that. And then the argument is invalid. Though such a word may exist, but then the argument is invalid. So we therefore assume that someone is great, okay? And then we reverse squiggle that again. We say for all x it is true that no one is funny and great. So we get that from 1, right? Then we drop the existential from 2. We get like A, who's funny. Then from 3, we get B, who's great. And then in the end, and again, like this one, I cannot really follow entirely. From 4, I can follow the operations, right? I just don't know what they do here. So we get from 4 that A must be funny and great, okay? Yeah, and then we get from 4 2 that B must be funny and great. And from 5 and 7, we get that A is not great. Okay. And from 6 and 8, from GB and not FB and GB, right? From here, no wait, from 6, from GB. We get that B is not funny. Okay, so I think we don't have a contradiction here, right? In this world, some things are F and some things are G, but nothing is both at once. In evaluating premise, it is not true that there exists an x so that fx and gx. First, evaluate the subformula that starts with a quantifier. There exists an x so that fx and gx is false. Oh, it's knocking. 1 second. Yeah, so I'm back. I'm sorry for the interruption. So yeah, really, sometimes I don't understand what they do here, right? So let's get back into this So we evaluate the subformula that starts with the quantifier. There exists an x so that fx and gx is false, since no case is true. So if we look here at the case fa, right? So a is funny, but a is also not great. So therefore, this is false. And then same for b. b is not funny, but is great. Therefore, this statement is also false. So the denial that there exists no x, that fx and gx is true. So for whatever we have assumed, the denial is true. And the premise there exists an fx is true, since at least one case is true, namely fa. In evaluating the conclusion, however, that there's no x, that is gx, again, first evaluate the subformula that starts with a quantifier. So there exists at least one gx is true, since at least one case is true. So the denial is false. So here the denial is false, which was our conclusion. So we get the premises all true and the conclusion false. These two rules are crucial. So yeah, what we have here, possible worlds for refutations must contain at least one entity, seldom more than, we need more than two entities. But so what is so weird about this, right? Or what I find so weird about this refutation. We don't say in the argument that there is someone who's great. But the problem is that if the premises are true, the conclusion can be false. And we just exemplify a case where the conclusion is false, where we lead to no contradiction. And I think this is what we have done here. So the conclusions, the premises still can be true when the conclusion is false. And there is no necessity from which we get from the premises to the conclusion. So this is how I believe the whole refutation thing works. And I think Gensler doesn't write that. If you think that my understanding of this refutation is wrong, then please let me know in the comments. That was basically what I wanted to do today. And again, I hope it makes sense to you. So I apologize if I didn't explain that very well overall. It's because I also study this stuff, right? And to me, even though it's like the beginning of the book, it doesn't always look super easy. And I feel especially in logic or anything that you do in math, the beginning is usually the harder part. When you later come to the more complicated problems, it's just trying to puzzle around and use the rules that you have already learned once you've internalized them. So therefore, practice is important. And I hope that my practice board comes soon and that then we can practice together. And I will make more mistakes, so forgive me my mistakes. But I also think it's true. We learn by mistakes, by false assumptions, by corrections, by discussions, right? I think that's how humans learn, not by doing everything right all the time. So if you like these study sessions together, then subscribe. We do more with that also with regard to other philosophies, not just with regard to logic. But right now my focus is on logic. And if you like it, please give it a like, share, subscribe, all the stuff. For the rest, I just say live long, do more logical mistakes, correct them, and prosper. Bye-bye.